The morning sky over Geneva shimmered with an otherworldly iridescence as the first Nexar ships pierced through the quantum fold. Dr. Maya Patel stood transfixed at the United Nations Observatory, her instruments recording unprecedented energy signatures that defied known physics. The vessels resembled massive crystalline structures, each one refracting sunlight in impossible ways, creating auroras that turned day into twilight. Dr. Patel, her eye assistant's voice carried an unusual note of urgency. I'm detecting quantum resonance patterns unlike anything in our databases. The crystalline structures appear to be alive. Before Maya could respond, every screen, device, and display across the planet flickered to life simultaneously. The message that followed was transmitted in every known human language, its tone both melodious and imperious. People of Earth, we are the Nexar Collective. Your civilization has been chosen for enlightenment. We offer you the gift of integration into our crystalline consciousness. You have 60 rotations of your planet to accept our guidance. Resistance is not advised. Those who reject enlightenment cannot be permitted to continue. Maya's fingers flew across her holographic interface, analyzing the transmission's underlying quantum signature. Something about the way the message propagated through Earth's communication networks felt wrong. Too perfect, too crystalline in its structure. Like the ships themselves, the transmission seemed to operate on principles that merged technology with organic life. Dr. Patel, General Sarah Chen's voice came through her secure channel. The Security Council needs your preliminary analysis. What exactly are we dealing with? Maya's eyes remained fixed on the data streams flooding her screens. They're not just advanced, General. They're different. These beings, the Nexar, they've evolved beyond individual consciousness. Their ships, their technology, even their communications are all part of some vast crystalline network. It's like they've turned their entire civilization into a living quantum computer. A weakness. The General's question was direct. Maybe. Maya isolated a curious pattern in the quantum noise. Their entire consciousness seems to depend on maintaining specific quantum states. If we could disrupt those states, she paused, the implications of what she was seeing beginning to sink in. General, I need everything we have on quantum decoherence technology. And I need it now. Over the next few days, more Nexar ships arrived, each one larger than the last. They positioned themselves in geometric patterns above Earth's major cities, their crystalline surfaces pulsing with internal light. The message repeated every 12 hours, counting down humanity's time to choose enlightenment. World leaders scrambled to respond, but the Nexar ignored all attempts at negotiation. Their message was clear: submission or extinction. No middle ground, no compromise, no independence. But while governments publicly debated surrender terms, Maya and a hastily assembled team of quantum physicists made a stunning discovery. The Nexar's consciousness network operated on predictable quantum frequencies, frequencies that could be disrupted. It's not just their technology, Maya explained to the Emergency Scientific Council, her voice tight with controlled excitement. Their entire collective consciousness depends on maintaining quantum coherence across their network. If we could generate a strong enough decoherence field, we could shut them down. Dr. James Wong, her colleague from CERN, finished the thought. Not their ships, not their weapons, their actual consciousness. The implications were staggering. They weren't just looking at a military countermeasure. They were contemplating the equivalent of consciousness death for an entire civilization. The moral weight of such a possibility filled the room with heavy silence. How long? Asked the council chair. Maya met their gaze steadily. To develop and deploy a global quantum decoherence grid, with unlimited resources and global cooperation. 55 days. We have 60 until their deadline. The chair looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each scientist present. They all knew what was at stake: humanity's independence, perhaps its very existence, against the ethical implications of what they were considering. Then we have no choice, the chair declared. We build the grid, but we also prepare a full diplomatic response. If we're going to hold the power to end their consciousness, we damn well better be certain they give us no alternative." As Maya left the council chamber, she looked up at the crystalline ships still hovering over the city. Their beauty was undeniable, a testament to what consciousness could achieve when unified in purpose. But that same unity had led them to deny other species the right to choose their own path. Now, humanity faced its own choice: submit to the Nexer's crystalline embrace, or develop the means to shatter their consciousness entirely. The next 55 days would determine not just the fate of humanity, but what kind of species humans would choose to be. The Quantum Decoherence Project was officially designated Operation Shattered Light. The greatest scientific minds on Earth would work together in absolute secrecy, while on the surface, humanity would appear to be preparing for submission. It would be the greatest deception in human history, and their only hope for survival. Deep beneath the Antarctic ice, in a hastily expanded research facility designated Haven, Dr. Maya Patel watched as the first prototype quantum decoherence generator hummed to life. Its crystalline core glowed with a soft blue light, perfectly mimicking the resonance frequency of the Nexer ships above. "Power reading stable," reported Dr. Wong, his eyes fixed on the monitoring equipment. "Quantum field coherence at 97% match with Nexer signatures." The test chamber contained a small sample of crystalline material, carefully collected from debris that had flaked off one of the Nexer ships during their atmospheric entry. Under normal circumstances, the crystal maintained a complex quantum state that seemed to carry information, perhaps even consciousness, through its structure. Initiating decoherence pulse in 3, 2, 1. The prototype emitted a barely perceptible wave of energy. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the crystalline sample flickered, its internal light stuttering like a candle in the wind. Within seconds, the complex quantum states that had danced through its structure collapsed into conventional matter. "Full quantum collapse achieved," Maya announced, her voice steady despite the weight of what they'd just accomplished. "The crystal is still intact, but its quantum information state has been completely disrupted." Around the world, similar tests were being conducted in hidden facilities. While governments publicly prepared for submission to the Nexer Collective, presenting a convincing show of defeat, humanity's greatest scientific minds worked tirelessly to develop their defense. The Nexer, confident in their superiority, never thought to look for quantum technology in the primitive species they'd come to enlighten. Their ships continued their orbital patterns, their crystalline surfaces pulsing with the light of shared consciousness, completely unaware of the weapon being forged in secret. But developing the technology was only part of the challenge. The moral implications of what they were attempting weighed heavily on everyone involved. "We need to understand exactly what we're doing," Maya insisted during an emergency meeting of project leaders. "This isn't just shutting down their technology. We're talking about disrupting the quantum states that maintain their collective consciousness. We need to be absolutely certain this is our only option." Dr. Elena Rodriguez, their xenobiologist, stepped forward. "I've been analyzing the Nexer's communications. Their collective consciousness isn't just a technological achievement. It's fundamentally changed who they are. They literally cannot conceive of individual consciousness as valid. To them, we're not just primitive. We're incomplete fragments that must be unified for our own good." "And there's no way to reason with them?" asked General Chen. "Their own consciousness structure makes it impossible," Elena explained. "Imagine trying to convince someone that 2 + 2 = 5. Their certainty in their rightness is literally built into their quantum neural network. They can't change their minds any more than we can change the laws of physics." The implications were clear. The Nexer would never accept humanity's right to remain independent. Their very consciousness structure made compromise impossible. As the deadline approached, humanity's deception grew more elaborate. Nations staged public arguments about surrender terms. Military forces conducted submission drills in plain sight of Nexer observers. Global media broadcasted debates about the benefits of joining the collective consciousness. Meanwhile, the quantum decoherence grid took shape in absolute secrecy. Generators were disguised as new power infrastructure, hidden in abandoned mines, concealed beneath urban development projects. Each one was carefully shielded to prevent the Nexer from detecting their true purpose. Maya spent countless hours fine-tuning the technology, haunted by the magnitude of what they were preparing to do. One evening, as she watched the Nexer ships through Haven's sophisticated periscope system, Dr. Wong joined her. Having second thoughts, he asked quietly. Not about whether we should do it, Maya replied, but about what it means for us, for humanity. We're about to gain the power to essentially end an entire civilization's consciousness. That kind of power, it changes things, changes us, which is exactly why it had to be us. Wong said, look at the Nexer. They achieved this level of advancement and lost their ability to even question their own actions. Whatever happens, we need to remember this moment. Remember what it feels like to wrestle with this decision. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert. New Nexer ships were arriving. Massive vessels unlike anything they'd seen before. The orbital sensors revealed vast chambers filled with crystalline structures, each one pulsing with the same quantum signatures as the Nexer consciousness network. They're not just coming to conquer us, Maya realized, horror dawning in her voice. They're bringing their entire civilization. Every ship that arrives puts more of their people in range of our weapon. The Nexer's supreme confidence in their superiority was leading them to concentrate their entire species within reach of humanity's last resort defense. Their greatest strength, their unified consciousness, had blinded them to the possibility that a primitive species could turn that very unity into a vulnerability. As Maya stared at the readings from the new arrivals, she knew that time was running out. They would soon have to make a choice that would echo through human history. Submit to eternal mental slavery, or become the species that ended an entire civilization's consciousness in an act of desperate self-defense. The quantum decoherence grid was nearly complete. Now they just had to hope they were making the right choice, and that humanity could live with the consequences of their decision. The quantum decoherence generator sparked and sputtered, its crystalline core cracking under the strain. Maya swore under her breath as another prototype failed. With 30 days left until the Nexer's deadline, every setback felt like a hammer blow to Earth's chances. Elena shook her head. The opposite. The more of their communications I decode, the clearer it becomes. Their drive to unify all consciousness isn't just policy. It's the foundation of their entire worldview. Allowing individual consciousness to continue is, to them, like allowing a deadly virus to spread. The debate raged in secret scientific councils worldwide. Was humanity justified in essentially destroying an entire civilization's consciousness to preserve their own independence? The Nexer weren't planning to kill humans. They wanted to enlighten them, integrate them into their collective consciousness. Yet to many, that fate seemed worse than death. As Project Echo entered its final testing phase, Maya received an urgent summons to a secure facility in the Himalayas. There, in a vast underground chamber, she found representatives from every major nation on Earth, along with the world's leading ethicists, philosophers, and religious leaders. Before we proceed further, the UN Secretary-General announced, we must be absolutely certain we have explored every alternative. Dr. Patel, you and your team have spent more time studying the Nexer than anyone. Is there any possibility of peaceful coexistence? Maya stepped up to the podium, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The Nexer's consciousness structure makes compromise impossible. Their quantum network doesn't just connect their thoughts, it reinforces their core beliefs. The more minds they add to their collective, the more certain they become of their own rightness. They literally cannot conceive of allowing us to remain independent. She brought up a holographic display showing the latest scans of Nexer ships in orbit. They're bringing their entire civilization into range because they cannot imagine failure. Their unity, their certainty, the very things that make them powerful, have become their greatest weakness. They're like a person so convinced of their invulnerability that they don't even see the sword at their throat. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity faced a terrible choice: submit to eternal mental slavery, or take an action that would effectively end an entire civilization's consciousness. There was no middle ground, no possibility of compromise or coexistence. As the meeting concluded, Maya returned to Haven with a heavy heart but renewed determination. In her absence, the team had made a breakthrough. The new network of quantum disruption devices was ready for full-scale testing. "We've solved the resonance problems," Dr. Wong reported excitedly. Each device acts like an instrument in an orchestra, but instead of creating harmony, they generate carefully calibrated discord. When activated together, they should create a quantum decoherence wave that will collapse their entire consciousness network. Maya studied the test results, noting how each device contributed to the larger effect. It was elegant in its way, using the Nexer's own principles of harmony against them. But the elegance of the solution did nothing to lighten the moral burden of what they were preparing to do. With just 2 weeks left until the deadline, humanity's greatest deception entered its final phase. While governments worldwide made a show of preparing for submission, the components of Project Echo were secretly moved into position. Each quantum disruption device was carefully concealed, ready to play its part in the symphony that would either save humanity or mark them forever as the species that ended an entire civilization's consciousness. Time seemed to slow to a crawl in Haven's control center as Maya watched the final pieces of humanity's greatest deception fall into place. On screens around the world, political leaders made impassioned speeches about embracing the future. Military forces conducted elaborate submission ceremonies, their weapons ceremonially disabled before Nexer observers. It was a masterpiece of misdirection, every human on Earth playing their part in a performance designed to convince an alien civilization of their complete surrender. Final device network status, Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "All quantum disruption nodes report ready," Dr. Wong confirmed, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "Lunar installations are complete. Solar observation posts confirm no detection by Nexer ships. We're as ready as we'll ever be." The Nexer had continued to arrive in ever greater numbers, their massive ships forming complex geometric patterns throughout the solar system. They brought not just their military forces, but their entire civilization. Research vessels, cultural repositories, and massive structures that seemed to serve as shared consciousness nexus points. Their confidence in their superiority had led them to concentrate nearly their entire species within range of humanity's hidden weapon. Elena burst into the control room, her face pale. New transmissions decoded. The Nexer. They're already preparing to begin the consciousness integration process. They're not waiting for the deadline. Maya's blood ran cold. "Show me." The data streamed across their screens, quantum frequency patterns that showed the Nexer preparing vast crystalline chambers designed to forcibly connect human minds to their network. The process would be permanent, irreversible, and they planned to begin with Earth's children. "They believe they're being merciful," Elena explained, her voice shaking. "In their view, the sooner they unify us, the less we'll suffer from our fragmentary existence. They're going to start with the young because their minds will adapt more easily to the collective consciousness." General Chen's voice came through their secure channel. "Dr. Patel, we're receiving reports of Nexer ships moving into position above major population centers. They're not waiting for our formal submission. How soon can the quantum disruption network be activated?" Maya studied the readouts from their global sensor array. The Nexer ships were indeed descending, their crystalline surfaces pulsing with patterns that seemed almost eager. They had no concept of requiring humanity's consent. To them, unifying consciousness was an absolute good, as natural and necessary as breathing. "The network is ready," Maya replied, "but activation requires synchronized input from 5 separate command centers. It was designed that way to ensure we couldn't take this step without absolute consensus." "The Security Council is convening now," the general informed them. "Every major nation on Earth will have to agree, given what we're seeing. I don't think the vote will take long." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Maya and her team ran final diagnostics on the quantum disruption network while monitoring the Nexer's movements. The aliens' preparations for forced consciousness integration continued, their ships moving into position with geometric precision. In Washington, Moscow, Beijing, London, and New Delhi, political leaders gathered in secret bunkers, preparing to make perhaps the most momentous decision in human history. Their public faces continued the charade of submission, but in secure chambers deep underground, they weighed the fate of two civilizations. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. Humanity would not submit to the loss of their individual consciousness. The quantum disruption network would be activated as soon as final preparations were complete. Maya found herself in the Antarctic Command Center with Dr. Wong and Alina, watching as the countdown sequence was initiated. Each of the 5 command centers would have to input their activation codes simultaneously, triggering a cascade of quantum effects that would ripple through the solar system at light speed. "New transmission from the Nexer flagship," Alina announced, her voice tight. They're thanking us for choosing enlightenment. They're expressing joy at welcoming us into their unified consciousness. They truly believe they're saving us." Maya closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of what they were about to do. The Nexar weren't evil. They were simply incapable of accepting the validity of individual consciousness. Their own unity, their certainty in their rightness, had led them to this moment. "Final activation codes are being distributed," Dr. Wong reported. "Command centers are standing by. Quantum network synchronization at optimal levels." On screens around the room, they could see the Nexer ships beginning their descent, their crystalline surfaces blazing with internal light as they prepared to begin the forced integration of human consciousness. They were moments away from beginning a process that would end human individuality forever. Maya took her place at the control station, entering her portion of the activation sequence. Around the world, 4 other scientists did the same. The quantum disruption network hummed to life, each node preparing to play its part in the symphony of discord that would shatter the Nexer's consciousness. "All command centers report ready." General Chen's voice came through clearly. "Dr. Patel, as the head of Project Echo, the final decision rests with you. Do we proceed?" Maya looked at the screens showing the descending Nexer ships, then at the faces of her colleagues. They had done everything possible to find another way, but the Nexer's own nature made conflict inevitable. It was consciousness against consciousness, individuality against unity, freedom against forced enlightenment. Her finger hovered over the final activation key as she prepared to give the order that would change the course of human history forever. Maya's voice cut through the tense silence of the command center. "All stations, initiate quantum disruption sequence. Now." 5 keys turned simultaneously across the globe. The hidden network of quantum devices activated as one, each generating its carefully calculated note of discord. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, spreading at the speed of light, a ripple of quantum decoherence began to spread through space. The effect on the Nexer ships was immediate and devastating. The brilliant crystalline patterns that had pulsed through their hulls stuttered, flickered, and went dark. Ships that had been descending with perfect precision suddenly hung motionless in the sky, their coordinated movement lost as the consciousness controlling them simply stopped. "Quantum disruption wave expanding at expected velocity," Dr. Wong reported, his voice barely a whisper. "Complete solar system coverage in 7 minutes, 13 seconds. On their monitors, they watched as ship after ship went dark, the complex quantum states that had maintained the Nexer's shared consciousness collapsing into ordinary matter. The bodies of the aliens remained alive, their basic biological functions continuing, but the vast, unified consciousness that had defined them as a species was gone. Alina's hands flew across her console as she monitored the Nexer's final transmissions. The last conscious moments, they felt confusion, then recognition. At the very end, they understood what we'd done. They never imagined, never thought we could. Her voice trailed off as the implications of what they'd just done began to sink in. They had ended the conscious existence of an entire civilization, not through violence or destruction, but through the careful application of scientific principles the Nexer themselves had thought beyond humanity's comprehension. Hours passed as they confirmed the complete effectiveness of the quantum disruption field. Every Nexer ship, every crystalline structure, every consciousness node had been affected. Their bodies lived, but the vast, unified mind that had driven them to enforce their version of enlightenment on the galaxy was gone. 3 days later, Maya stood before the United Nations General Assembly, preparing to deliver humanity's first public explanation of what had truly happened. "The beings in those ships still live," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the planet through the global broadcast network. "They breathe, their hearts beat, but the consciousness that made them who they were no longer exists. We did not choose this outcome. They forced our hand by refusing to accept our right to remain ourselves." She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives of humanity. "But with this victory comes responsibility. We now hold the key to a technology that can end consciousness itself. This knowledge can never be unclaimed, never be unknown. We must ensure it is never used again, except in the most dire circumstances of self-defense." The next months were filled with unprecedented challenges. Teams of doctors and scientists worked to care for the millions of living but unconscious Nexer bodies. Research began into the possibility of helping them develop new individual consciousness, a process that would take years, if it proved possible at all. More importantly, humanity had to come to terms with what they had done and what it meant for their future. The quantum disruption technology was both a shield and a burden. Other spacefaring civilizations, learning of what happened to the Nexer, gave Earth a wide berth. Humanity had proven themselves willing and able to defend their independence with devastating effectiveness. 1 year after the activation of Project Echo, Maya returned to Haven. The facility had been converted into a research center dedicated to understanding consciousness in all its forms. In a secure vault deep beneath the ice, she studied the original quantum decoherence generator, the prototype that had started it all. "Do you ever wonder if we made the right choice?" Dr. Wong asked, joining her at the vault's observation window. Maya considered the question carefully. "We chose individual consciousness over forced unity, freedom over enlightenment at gunpoint. The tragedy isn't what we did. It's that the Nexer's own nature made conflict inevitable. They literally couldn't imagine leaving us alone." She turned away from the vault, walking with Wong through halls now dedicated to understanding consciousness in all its infinite varieties. "But we can imagine. We can question. We can doubt. That's the gift and burden of individual consciousness, the ability to make choices and live with their consequences." Above them, the Antarctic sky shimmered with auroras. Natural ones now, no longer reflecting alien ships. The Nexer vessels remained in orbit, converted into research stations and memorials. Their crystalline hulls no longer pulsed with unified consciousness, but they served as a constant reminder of both humanity's achievement and the terrible price of preserving their independence. "We're not alone in the universe," Maya continued, watching the lights dance across the sky. "Somewhere out there are other civilizations, other forms of consciousness we have yet to encounter. When we meet them, we'll carry both the wisdom and the burden of what happened here. We'll remember that unity imposed is not unity at all, and that consciousness, in all its chaotic individual forms, must be free to choose its own path." The quantum disruption network remained, carefully maintained but never activated again. It stood as humanity's shield and sword, a reminder to any who might seek to impose their will on Earth that humanity would go to extraordinary lengths to preserve their right to individual consciousness. As Maya looked up at the stars, she wondered what other forms of consciousness humanity would encounter as they ventured into space. She hoped they would find civilizations willing to coexist, to celebrate diversity rather than enforce unity. But if they didn't, humanity would be ready. They had proven themselves capable of defending their independence through innovation and determination, even against seemingly insurmountable odds. The age of enforced unity was over. The dawn of true independence and all its challenging implications had begun.